Hello, and welcome to the Argyle CIO Leadership Forum. My name is Nick with Argyle, and a couple of notes before I turn things over to our esteemed speaker. First, a quick reminder to stop by our sponsors' virtual booths at any time during today's event and for the following week. Our partners are committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience. At any time during today's event, you can visit their virtual booths from the main agenda page, which include complimentary materials, information, and meet and greet opportunities. To ask questions throughout the session, simply type into the Q&A chat, and we will address your questions at the end of the session. Now, without further delay, I would like to introduce our speaker, Don Welch, VP for IT and Global University CIO, New York University. We are excited to have Don with us for a keynote presentation titled Ready, Set, Succeed, Mastering Authentic IT Leadership Skills. Welcome, Don. Over to you.
Thanks, Nick. And hello, everybody. As Nick said, I'm Don Welch, and I am NYU CIO. I've been in C-suite positions for about 25 years. And I've also taught leadership classes. And so what I'd like to do today is talk to you a bit about what I see as why leadership is important, and then go a little bit into some practical aspects of how you can be a better leader. I think that's an important part of being a leader, is to look to continually improve, and of course, to get your team to continually improve. To do that, I'm going to talk about trust, which I believe is the foundation for leadership, some techniques on effective communication, and also what I think is the most effective technique that I have found to help build my leadership skills. So this chart that we've got up here, when I first came across this, I thought this was really fascinating. So if you look at our, human beings' global ability to produce goods and services, there is a huge change in the end of the 19th century in our ability to do this. And a number of economists have theorized that there were a number of factors, but one of the major factors was the invention of the corporation, and specifically corporations that had research labs. And if you think about before the 19th century, if you had a brilliant idea that you wanted to take and it would benefit people as widely as possible, you had to have that idea. You also needed to be able to know how to produce it at scale, how to get the raw materials, how to distribute it, how to make people understand it was valuable to them and sell that to them. And that all had to be wrapped up in one person. With corporations, we had people who specialized in all the key areas, but all those specialists needed to work together. And so at that point, we really started to develop the ideas of management, or our ability to coordinate and manage work. But more importantly, I think we also were able to leverage leadership. And if I think of management as that organization of work, then leadership is the ability to inspire people to achieve a common goal. And very different. Management, based on authority, someone has got the accountability and the responsibility to organize things. But leadership is much more about a person-to-person relationship. And in good leadership, you end up with a team that produces more than the sum of its parts. So it's a force multiplier, so to speak. So there's been a lot of studies who've said why leadership, teams that are led well, organizations that are led well are much more productive. Simple internet search will find you hundreds of resources. But key things, obviously, those teams are going to be more productive. You're going to have better employee engagement. morale and job satisfaction will be much higher. Collaboration, communication, these teams are going to be more adaptable, more innovative, fewer conflicts, and reduced turnover. So lots of benefits. Those are some of the key benefits there. But it's really somewhat surprising that we have to make the case for leadership, but in some organizations, I think we really do neglect that as being a key component of our ability to successfully deliver IT services. So I want you to think about people that you have worked for in your career, and there are those people that you would gladly work for again, and those people who you never want to work for again. And if you think about the characteristics of those that you want to work for, you probably find that trust is one of the things that when you trusted them and they trusted you, that was one of the key components. And someone who you couldn't trust is probably not on any of your lists of people that you want to work for again. And in fact, people that you didn't trust are probably down on that other list. So how do you build trust? Trust is a word that we use. It's maybe a little squishy to kind of get your arms around. But thinking about the characteristics, if I think about someone that I would really like to work for again, I knew that she cared about me personally and professionally. There was no doubt she wanted me to achieve all the professional goals that I wanted. And when we had a personal relationship, I know we cared about each other as people. There was no doubt in my mind that she put the organization over herself. She did not have hidden agendas. She was a fair person. She didn't play favorites. Yes, she cared about people, but she was certainly fair in her decisions. She was reliable. When I needed something, I could depend that she would do her best to get it for me, or explain why she couldn't. When she said she would do something for me, there's no doubt that she would follow through. This reliability certainly, makes your job easier, and you're willing to do more, to take more risk. She's competent. She didn't know more about my job than I did, but she knew her job well. But I wouldn't say that was the driving factor of why I wanted to work for her. She understood things, but she wasn't necessarily, that wasn't the key thing. But I think one of the most important things was this honesty and transparency. If you look at all the other characteristics above that, this idea that I could trust her, the idea, organization over self, was because she could communicate with me, and I believed what she was saying. Of course, she backed it up, but she was a good communicator. When I think of someone who I never want to work for again, he was a nice person. I liked him personally. He was certainly smart. He was brilliant. He thought he knew my job better than I did. Whether he did or not, we could debate that. But I couldn't trust him. He changed his perspective when he told me something. I couldn't believe that he would follow through on it. I couldn't believe that it was even what he believed at the time. And the times that he told me he would support me on some issue, too many times. It was like, for those of you the right age, Charlie Brown and Lucy with the football. He would say he would support me, and I would get his commitment, and then he wouldn't follow through. So I think if you are going to be a positive leader and build trust, you've got to be a good communicator. So what I'd like to do now is focus a bit more on communication and talk about that effective communication and the things that can get in the way of it. So if we look at it from a systems point of view, when we want to communicate, we've got a sender, and we're going to choose a channel and encode a message. So we could text, email, we could do a phone call, we could do a Zoom meeting, we could meet in person. There's some channel for communicating that, and we'll encode it appropriately. And we can be brilliant communicators. We can write the most eloquent emails. We can speak extremely well. That message gets transmitted, but then we are relying on the receiver. The receiver receives that message, has to interpret it, and this idea comes into their mind that is hopefully pretty close to the idea that was in my mind when I wanted to send it. Now, along the way, there can be a lot of things that interfere with it. There can be some external things. You can be on a Zoom meeting and a bad connection, but more than likely, there are things that are going on with the receiver that you have no control over. So previous context, what they understand about the message that you're sending, previous interactions they've had with you or with others that will give them some context. Other things that are totally unrelated to you. They may have just had an emotional confrontation with someone on their team. They may have had a bad commute into work. Their dog may be sick. There are all these things that may impact their ability to decode the message, especially if it's an important or an emotional message, be able to process it and handle it appropriately. So the only way that we can have some sense of assurance that we are communicating effectively is to get some feedback. If we have a Zoom meeting or an in-person meeting, a lot of times we can read facial expression, we can listen for tone in someone's voice, but that is not always going to be the most accurate. What I have found over time is I need to get some feedback from the receiver to have some sense of assurance that they understand the message as I have intended it. Now, one way to do it, of course, is to ask them for feedback. But I think we have to be careful when we're asking for feedback if someone doesn't volunteer it, and that we don't want to sound condescending. So asking someone to say, all right, I just told you what your priority is, repeat back to me, what is your priority? You know, that can be a little off-putting. What I like to do is I put the onus back on me, and I will say, I'm not really sure I explained that well to you. Can you tell me what you think I said about your priorities? A little less confrontational, but also I'll get an idea whether or not they have appropriately understood my message. So I think this idea of feedback is important, but also we have to flip it around because we want to build trust with our team members. And to build trust, they have to know that you care about them personally and professionally. And they know that because they know you are listening to them and you are hearing them. So when you listen to your someone that you're communicating with, obviously you shouldn't be looking at your phone or doing whatever, but offer that feedback unsolicited. Do a little bit of a paraphrase of what they said to confirm that you understand what they meant. They then understand that you care what they were saying, you care enough to make sure that you understand it, and that they have communicated accurately, whatever it may be. If you communicate with your team that way and they communicate with you, I think it can't help but build trust over time. So what I'd like to do now is focus a little bit more on that noise or those things that can impact that decoding and ways that we can get around it. So normally we talk about things. Most of our communications with people are pretty straightforward. There's nothing really controversial, but we do get in those really important communications in which emotions are running high. The stakes are important, and it is very easy for a lot of these other factors to garble that message, and we end up with poor communication, which compounds the problems that we're trying to solve. So especially in these emotional discussions, I have found it really helpful to know what I want from the discussion. So for an example, my father and I, especially as he got older, had a very fraught relationship. And a lot of our conversations, he would be saying things and accusing me of things, and being generally pretty unhappy with me. I knew that what I wanted out of those conversations was not to convince him differently or to defend myself, but I wanted to keep our relationship alive. That was my goal, is that I wanted to keep a relationship with him till the end of his life. Knowing that helped me keep my emotions under control and keep the conversation in a place where we could still have that communication and could still keep that that relationship. Hopefully, your professional conversations will not be as fraught and emotional as a father-son relationship, but they can get pretty heated in the workplace. So this idea of when you are going into an important conversation, one where emotions may get involved, and knowing what you want, I think is really important. And I would advise you to try and do that. If you get surprised, you're in a conversation, a meeting, and you didn't expect things to get emotional, but they do start to get emotional. If you can step back and think about, what do you want out of this meeting, out of this conversation, that will help you then determine what you're going to say, keeping your emotions in check. Those I think are important and come to a successful conclusion. Keeping on the right topic. I'm sure we've all been in meetings, and being in higher education, I'll tell you, this is very common. You're talking about one thing and someone brings up some history. In higher ed, it might be very ancient history. 10 years ago, we did this and you guys did this, and so we can't do that. And so keeping the conversation focused on the right topic, I think, is critical. Telling someone, yes, I understand there were different people involved. We won't do that again. How are we going to move forward? And keeping focused on the right topic is critical. Obviously, controlling your emotions, not much easier said than done, but trying to do that, trying to keep your emotions out of it, knowing what you want, keeping focused on the right topic, helps me control my emotions, and I think that can help you too. Finding common ground. So as you get into these discussions, trying to bring the conversation back to common ground, I find very effective. So, for example, I've got shadow IT organization, and they are not patching their systems. And they will come up with, as I am holding them accountable for patching their systems, they will come back with, yes, but I've got to keep the faculty in mind. I can't do it during term end period. This member has got research, running on their computer, et cetera. And I'm like, yes, but we really want to make sure that this faculty member doesn't lose their intellectual property. We want to protect the personal information in their research database, et cetera. So coming back to that common ground, the thing that we know we both agree on, we want to protect the data on these computers, and then being able to expand that common ground. So we want to do this. How are we going to get to the next step? Can you patch it by this point? Do you need help? Yes, they need help. Oh, I can provide help. We've got a little more common ground now. So bringing that conversation back to common ground, I think, is absolutely critical to having successful conversations when the stakes are high and when emotions get to run high. All right, so that's a little bit of a lesson. I think that's important. If we're going to grow as a leader, we have to continually improve. As I mentioned earlier, I have taught leadership classes, and we would go through our week-long course. People would come away with 20 things that they thought, yes, this would be great. I want to improve on these. This will make me a great leader. And then the half-life of all those ideas, was about 3 days into when they got back to work and everything piled up on them, and they'd make no progress. What I really encourage them to do is to limit their focus, to choose just a few things. I would say choose 3, after a week course. I will say, my advice to you is to choose one thing that you can focus on. Like if you want to improve your communication, just focus on that and reflect on it every day. Thinking about, and it could be at the end of the day, it could be the next morning, could be during your lunch break, whatever works for your schedule. Just once a day, take a few minutes and reflect on your communications. What did I do well? What did I not do well? What can I do better tomorrow? And I encourage you to write this down. So have a journal and write in it. You may never read that journal, but we know that if we are going to internalize behavior, we want as many sets of neurons in our brains activated as possible. And when we think about something, when we write something, when we speak something, when we see something, all of those activate slightly different paths in our brain and broaden that. So I think the easiest thing to do is just this idea of writing down your reflections, just taking 2 or 3 minutes every day to do that will help change these actions that you want into your default behaviors. And be patient. You don't change default behaviors overnight. I read a study one time that said it takes about 200 repetitions, conscious repetitions of a behavior to make this become your default behavior. And my anecdotal experience is, yeah, that's probably about right. 200 repetitions means if you want to be a better communicator and you focus on that for about a year, that's about 200 work days, and that's about what it takes. Obviously, you'll get better as time goes on, but by the end of the year, no doubt you'll be a better communicator, or whatever behavior it is that you want to change. So, I am now coming to the end of my talk, and I just want to wrap up with a few parting thoughts. IT is complicated. Leadership is the glue that binds all these people with these great skill sets, great abilities, different personalities, different strengths and weaknesses. Leadership is what groups them all together and lets them produce beyond their individual contributions to be a great team. Technology is easy, right? Once you have great people, we can make the technology work. But IT, to be successful, we have to interact with our stakeholders, we have to interact with our users, and most importantly, we have to be a great team. And leadership is the thing that allows us to be a great team. So, Nick, I understand we might have some questions, so I'll turn it over to you.
Great. We sure do, Don. That was excellent. And we have an interesting question here from an audience member. How are millennials and Gen Z redefining leadership, and how do more traditional models of leadership need to change?
Yeah, so it is a great question. I've read a lot about how different generations want different things in the workplace, and tell you my perspective is that people are all different. We can effectively say, oh, baby boomers are different than millennials, than Gen Zs, and so forth. But that's as a group. But you will find baby boomers who have the same kinds of values as a Gen Xer and vice versa. And this also brings diversity, equity, and inclusion into place. People who come from different backgrounds all may have different, slightly different value systems, different perspectives, different experiences, and so forth. And so as a leader, we have to understand the people that we're leading. And it's on us to adapt our leadership styles for them versus on them to adapt to the way we want to lead. And I think good leaders understand people as individuals and lead them appropriately, understand what their values are, their wants, their needs, their desires. And I didn't mention it, but certainly someone's background in terms of what generation they are may influence how they would interpret your message. And so that idea of communication, being able to be effective with all people, regardless of their age, experience, their where they're from, all of those different things is what differentiates great leaders from mediocre leaders.
Great. Another interesting question from the audience. Empathy is not my strong point. What are some ways to build this skill?
Yeah, so I had a discussion earlier this week with one of the leaders in my organization about can we develop certain things, certain values of our personalities. I think that we are who we are as people, and we have strengths and weaknesses. And I would say not being an empathetic person is certainly going to be a bit more challenging to have people believe that you care about them. One approach can be fake it till you make it. And yes, it sounds a little flip, but the fake it till you make it is not necessarily a bad idea for all of us. I come into work someday, I'm tired, I'm mad, I've got some other distraction, but I've got a one-on-one with somebody and I want to make them believe that they're the most important person in the world. And so forcing myself to pay attention to them, to give the right cues, even though in the back of my mind, this is not where I want to be or who I want to be talking to, I think that ability is an important thing. But I also think it's, unless you are one of the people who is, has a very different personality, the more we get to know people, the more we understand them, I think it's natural for us to be a bit more empathetic. You might not end up being the most empathetic person in the world, and frankly, being too empathetic can be a problem. But having some empathy because you understand those people. That's why I say about it's important to care about someone in a personal sense. You want, as much as they're willing to share, you want to know about them, care about them as a person, their family, their what they do on the weekends and so forth. It may seem like small talk, but that's this important human glue of who we are. We are a social species, and that's important. So knowing that it's important to be empathetic, trying to force yourself to be empathetic, to certainly act empathetic, and then hopefully you will grow into a little bit more of that. I think you can be successful.
Great. I think we can squeeze one more question in. Self-assessment is good, but we can have some bias and/or blind spots. What outside validation do you recommend to make sure diverse groups agree with your self-assessment and/or open up new areas of growth?
Yeah, so feedback is a gift, but it can be a very painful gift if you really listen to it. As I tell my children, Your spouse should make you a better person. My spouse, will be very honest with me, which has helped me be a better person. You need to encourage feedback from all the people that you interact with professionally. And when they give you feedback, no matter how painful it is, you have to know that you value it. They have to know you value that feedback. Because they're not going to be honest, they're not going to give you feedback, especially if you are someone who is more senior. People are going to be really reluctant. They have to know that you want it and that they trust that you will take it in the way it's intended as a positive, and that certainly they're not going to suffer for it. But it is really hard to get that feedback, so you really have to listen closely. People will try to be tactful, but listen for what they're really saying. Pay attention and then take it to heart. Is it true? Is there something I should do better? That is not easy, but it's an important skill.
Great. Well, thank you again, Don, for such an incredible keynote. I also want to thank everyone else for joining us today. This session, along with all of today's content, will be available on demand following the event. This officially concludes the Argyle CIO Leadership Forum. We would like to give sincere thanks to today's sponsors, Adobe, Rimini Street, and Zoom. Today's event would not have been possible without their support. Thank you again for joining us today and engaging in our content. Have a great rest of your day.